teams on a high after their last result. Two batsmen that have served us, arguably the finest innings of this year's tournament so far. And we're back at the ground that promises to deliver more and more runs. So, should make for a fascinating contest. Kings 11 Punjab against Rajasthan Royals is the game that we're focusing on Whirlpool Presents ESPN Cricket 4020 Timeout, powered by Dell, in the very well prepared company of Ian Bishop and Sanjay Manjrekar, as they both join us for this. And it looks like I'm going to start with just Sanjay opening the batting. Yeah, Bish is with us as well. So let's
not as well prepared as you thought.
No, your standards are so high now that I come to expect a certain something from you. Let's start with news from Sharjah, which is that Steve Smith has won the toss, and these are now fascinating conversations with trends developing in the tournament. But unlike what he did in the last game, he's deciding to have a bowl first on this occasion. CSK put them in last game, so he's deciding to have a bowl. Said something like the wicket was sticky when they bowled when they had it first time around last time. But Sanjay, thoughts on that? Is that a bit of a surprise, a decision to bowl first at Sharjah?
This is the comfort zone. You sort of setting targets. I've said this many times, for today's players is a far more challenging and tough task than actually chasing. And considering that their batting has been good in that one inning so far, they must feel confident of chasing, and maybe the pitch at the time may have something for the bowlers. A little surprised with the changes that were told to us of one team at the toss, but of course that we'll discuss as the show goes on. Yes,
absolutely. Let me see if I have Bish well connected now. Hope you can hear me now. Bish, well prepared, well researched. Oh, yes, brilliant. We have a couple of changes, and we knew Josh Butler would come in. We spoke in the preview on whether he'd partner Steve Smith. That looks like the indication now that Yashasvi Jaiswal misses out Bish, and so too does David Miller. Let's start with the Butler selection. So it's pretty clear now that Butler and Smith will open for Rajasthan. Thoughts on that?
No-brainer. The way that he went last season, the way that England have pushed him up front, and the job that he's doing, no-brainer.
Sanjay?
Yeah, I read a report somewhere on a platform saying that Butler might be batting down the order and they'll continue with Steve Smith at the top, which would have been a drastic move. Josh Butler, I mean, his numbers last season, or IPL numbers, I think, are something like a strike rate of 160, average of 60, batting at the top of the order. Why would you change that? So like Bish, yes, exactly my view, no-brainer.
What about that call, though, to leave out David Miller and bring in Ankit? We were contemplating whether they would leave a Tom Curran out and play an Indian seamer. They've gone effectively a batter light. Sanjay?
Is it the confidence of getting a 200 in the only game that they've played? Because it doesn't seem like a very sensible move, because they could have afforded to drop somebody like a Tom Curran and have an Indian pace bowler and retained Miller to add a little bit of strength to their batting. Because when you look at that batting order, you've got Butler at the top, you've got Steve Smith, you've got Sanju Samson, and after that, you get into the Tevatiyas and the Uttapas and Riyan Parag, all good players. But there is a little bit of, what should I say, I don't think it looks as dependable. And Miller would have been another sort of, I keep using the term that I like best to describe that particular point, is the X factor with the bat down the order.
You're a big fan of Riyan Parag, Bish. Clearly they're trusting him and Robin Uthappa with a lot more batting responsibility. What do you make of this call?
Yes, it wasn't the one that I was expecting to see, to be honest with you. As much as I like Riyan Parag, and I go back to, I think, a knock he played, I think it was at Eden Gardens last year, how aggressive and mature he looked beyond experience, beyond his age. So let's see how it plays out. It's certainly not where I would have gone, not at Sharjah anyway.
Right, he did play that 47 at the Eden Gardens against Kolkata last year, and since then seems like someone who would make this team. Ankit Rajput comes in, though, new franchise for Rajput after moving from the Kings 11. What does he bring, Sanjay, for you as a Indian seam option? They had Varun Aaron, who they could have brought in. They had Karthik Tyagi as the young fast bowler. They've gone for an Ankit Rajput at Sharjah. What do you make of that?
Yeah, they also had the option of O'Shane Thomas, but foreign player. Who do you bring him in place of? But Ankit Rajput is a seasoned kind of Indian bowler. I would have liked to see Varun Aaron. Played a few games. Typically, he'll be expensive, but he'll also perhaps get you a wicket or two. But I don't think it's that big, a decision going for Ankit Rajput and not so much Varun Aaron.
Bish?
Experience, I suppose, on a small ground in Sharjah instead of the young seamer Varanaran. At times, when we saw him briefly last season, I thought he looked reasonably good. But again, it's one of those selections that I'd like to see. I have to see how it plays out. Really, again, I'm a little surprised that they've gone with what, 4 seamers here.
Yeah, I mean you've got
Yeah.
an Ankit Rajput, and then
Jofra,
you've got Karan,
Unatkat,
you've got
Tomkat.
Jofra, and you've got Unatkat. So that's 4 seamers plus the 2 leggies in Tewatia and Shreyas Gopal. So take a look. He's got plenty of options. Steve Smith, Riyang Parag can roll his arm over too. He wasn't called for that in the first game, but let's see if Steve Smith.
The one thing.
Yes,
The
yes.
one thing that we could perhaps say, and again is speculating, is that the way Jofra played at the back end of that last knock, and Tom Curran we know can bat, so that does lend some depth to the batting.
Yeah.
That's an area that we can look at.
Yes,
And
Shreyas
also
Gopal
perhaps
didn't get a bat.
watching. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes,
Rana, the problem with
please.
this kind of a system is you're not aware. That I just want to make a quick point to what Bish just said is that also I think teams are now trying to commit to one area of their team, so they've gone a
Right,
little
yes.
light on batting and strengthening one facet, and they've seen some good results in recent times when teams have done that.
Yeah,
Can I come back on that, Arcade? Yeah, because remember we talked last time that I think we had discussed at Sharjah, because the pitch is usually so good, you depend and you almost ask your specialist batsmen to ensure that you're getting, but where you really need strength is because the wicket is so flat, runs flow, so you need many options.
Yeah, I mean, Shreyas Gopal didn't bat in the last game. He was scheduled to therefore come in at 10, and that's a decent bat to have at number 10. So gives you an indication of why Rajasthan have decided that it's okay to go without the services of David Miller. Kings 11 Punjab, there's a little bit of chit-chat ahead of this game, whether this is the ideal venue and the ideal game to play with Gale. They've resisted that temptation. They've stuck with the same team that beat the Royal Challengers Bangalore so convincingly. So 2 things that stand out from that. One, that they continue to give Nicholas Pooran and Glenn Maxwell, both of whom haven't quite had the big scores in the first 2 games in this season. And the second, that they also play 2 leg spinners at Sharjah, a ploy that did seem to work for Rajasthan Royals. So let's get into the first one. Bish, no Chris Gale. Is that a sensible or a reasonable call for you?
I don't have a problem with that. I think we said that last time for the very reason that Maxwell and Pooran need an extra chance, right? It's only 2 games into the season and you won your last game. Plus, the fielding of Maxwell and to a much lesser extent Pooran would be much better than what Chris Gale now at 40 can bring to the squad. If Pooran and Maxwell get off on that small ground as well, yes, Chris Gale at his pump would be incomparable. But Pooran now is a trusted guy. You're looking for those big shots, and Maxwell we've seen do it before. So I am not surprised.
I guess, Sanjay, batsmen will feel very bullied or very aggrieved if the best batting surface comes up, and at that time you say you want to play Prince Gale and not give me the chance to get runs.
Yeah, but very sensible call. It's another, no-brainer, and I think they've gone for long-term gains rather than just short-term using Gale at Sharjah. They're hoping Pooran comes off, Maxwell comes off. And little trivia, I think Bish has been to Sharjah and has shared that on the Hindi show. So I'm obliged to share it on the English show as well. There's a roundabout just outside Sharjah Stadium. And there is a sign, you have signs at the roundabout and there's one road and the sign says graveyard. In the direction of the graveyard, that's an actual graveyard. And I've always felt as a player to just tilt that sign and pointed towards the Sharjah Stadium. No, I'm not kidding. There is actually a sign very close to the roundabout near the stadium.
Yep, tells you all you need to know. Maybe that's why Ankit Rajput's playing Aaron and Karthik Raj. But no, next game.
And no fast bowlers. I guess Sharjah, you need fast bowlers, at least 4, because spinners, however good you are. I mean, when you look at Sharjah of the past as well, you remember any spinners' performance? It's more, people like Wasim, Waqar, people with pace who, managed there.
Wow, but let's talk about the call to keep both Bishnoi and Murugan Ashwin in the team. It turned out to be a great call, Bish, last game against an RCB team where there are numbers that suggest why not play both leggies. Here they are now playing at Sharjah. Is this going to be a much stiffer challenge? And they've got Butler, they've got Steve Smith. And what do you make of the 2 spinners keeping their place for this one?
Oh, a different challenge, by far a different challenge. And sometimes, from a bowling perspective, what I found, and I think what is logical, is that, okay, if you're playing at Perth, for example, in Australia, you expect your economy rate to be a certain level. But if you are considering bowling well and you go to Sharjah, you just have to set your mind that what was good at Perth will be a little bit higher at Sharjah, and that would be acceptable there. Small ground, so the length is critical. Though remember, with Chawla and with Jadeja, they bowled too full, and Sanju Samson climbed into them in that previous game for Rajasthan Royals. So these two leg spinners have to be very aware to pull their length back slightly.
Sanjay?
Yeah, not just the size of the ground as well. The pitch is also good at the moment. As the season goes on, you might expect the pitch to get slower, so hitting through the line may not be as easy. But to answer your question, I think Bishnoi will be fine. I think this guy has a very good temperament. I don't think he'll be perturbed by who's batting against him. Ashwin, with Anil Kumble as the coach, expect spinners to get a little more of a long rope. Plus, he got 3 wickets in the last match. So that confidence should help him.
Right, let's talk a bit about Kings 11 Punjab. They're batting now, and KL Rahul was sensational last game. When you've seen in 1 week, Bish, that this is a ground now that perhaps the average score is going to be higher, we have to get more. Does that change the way you approach it at times? Can you be tempted to go too hard, too early? Does that change your approach when you've gone from a Dubai, where they've played both their previous games now, to Sharjah?
Excellent point, RK. And you have
Excellent
to be
question.
very careful. Yeah, because we have a ground in the Caribbean that is slightly similar called Warner Parkinson Kits. It's like a teacup. And
Yeah.
it seduces a lot of batsmen when they come there into trying to go big too early. I think you have to sort of display the same principles as you would normally to start your innings. And then once you get into flow, you try to maximize the run. If you make the mistake of being too greedy too early, then you pay the penalty. So I'm not saying don't go for the big hits, but just ensure that you size things up first.
Sanjay?
Yeah, maybe one of the factors as to why Steve Smith elected to bowl and put the pressure, on the opposition to set the target.
In some way, perhaps, does it also try and explain the Chris Gayle call? They must have been tempted. He would have been some player, even if he's hitting it well in the nets. But you've got Rahul and Mayank, who've been so good in both games, proper batsmen. And then you have the luxury of Maxwell and a Puran as and when you need it. Is this the ideal type of batsman you want? When Chris Gayle comes in, it seems like everyone else has to play slightly differently to accommodate someone like Gayle. Sanjay?
Yeah, if you didn't have as many power hitters down the line in the team, then you would be tempted to having Gale because he makes your life easier. For example, maybe, if you look at RCB, they would want some firepower at the top, and so that people like Virat and others can take it a little easy. But they've got Puran, if he gets going, he'll get you runs at 160 strike rate. And you've got Maxwell, if he fires. Rahul at the top, that season when they played together, he was constantly overshadowing Chris Gayle. So good call, sensible calls. And, staying in the present and looking at Gale versus the settled pair of Mayank Agarwal and Rahul. So good call again.
Yeah, I wonder what you're thinking if you're Nicholas Puran right now, Bish. He's come off such a good CPL. He's so highly rated. We know the kind of talent that he has. He's now at 2 games, and now he comes up at what is supposed to be now the best batting surface in the tournament. You could see in the last game, perhaps he was wanting to take his time, and just as he seemed he was steadily found a way to get out. But is this the kind of game which adds more pressure on you if you're Nicholas Puran? That, I need to get a score now, or perhaps they could come down and scrutinize my place?
Oh, he definitely will be feeling scrutiny and under scrutiny. Nicholas is still a little too inconsistent in the context of T20 cricket. It's such a fast-paced game that you're not going to find a high level of consistency unless you're one of the best players. I do hope that Nicholas grows into being that, but he certainly will be feeling a little bit of a glare of the spotlight. The other thing is that there's a stat yesterday, I think since 2017, 83% of captains who have won the toss in that time period have chosen to chase because guys are very comfortable and knowing what they have to go for, chasing 11 and 12 and over. So, yeah, I think the Puran thing is good. I don't think you wanted to break up Rahul and Agarwal after what they've done so early. And that's another thing against Gayle.
What kind of batsman is Puran though, Bish? Before I go to you, Sanjay, just where is he ideally suited? Karun Nair could come in at 3, or Nicholas Puran could come in. They start with 2 right-handers, so I don't think they overdo the right-left thing as much as some of the others. But would Puran be better served coming in early and taking some time, or is he the kind that may be more effective if you keep him for lesser balls and just ask him to play with the free hand?
Okay, just to contextualize him, there are some batsmen, if you give them a lot of time, they get confused. I think Sanjay has touched on several batsmen in the past over these seasons. Nicholas Puran, Nicholas Puran is not one of those. Nicholas Puran, for me, is a guy who's intellectual, a deep thinker of what he's trying to do. I think if Nicholas Puran comes in early, what I want to see him grow into is a guy who doesn't feel the need to always rush to play with style more than substance. I think he's learning that he can trust his defense as little of there is at T20 level, and then he can play the big shots and hit the ball as far as most other people.
Sanjay, interesting to hear Bish's thoughts on Puran.
Yeah. And he said, he's a thinker, he's an intellectual. That's why I always believe that Bish should have batted at number 3 for West Indies during his playing days.
That is a sledge.
Okay, coming back to Puran, there's only one thing that I see with certain players is the IPL anxiety. It's a new term that I've invented. Owen Morgan seems to have overcome a little bit of that anxiety in the last game. So if Puran is carrying that anxiety, then maybe better off just putting him down the order, where you have the license to hit, and if you get out, nobody minds it. But with such players, Ronak, and I expect Anil Kumble to do that. If Anil Kumble tells Puran that we don't care if you get out 5 games in a row, you are going to be a batsman for the season, just play your game. Makes a world of a difference. And so far, with the selections and tactics, I think a lot of good things have happened with Kings and Punjab.
Yeah, IPL anxiety could be a whole chapter in Glenn Maxwell's autobiography, unless this season goes well. So that's the other batsman I want to talk about. It might help that the team had a good result and should have ideally won their first game too, Sanjay. But at what stage are we going to again have a discussion? We've had so many years, Glenn Maxwell, big money signing, same franchise, different setup though. And is he under pressure just yet? Or do you give Maxwell that security too? Like you said, you're going to play every game, Glenn Maxwell. Don't worry about wanting to get your eye, get too obsessed with your score.
See, recently when he batted in England, he showed everyone that he has that game. It's not like he's completely, gone off his batting and is struggling. Along with inconsistency, there's also the power game is gone. And he played some mind-boggling shots. And that's the reason teams still want to back Maxwell. Is he the kind of a guy who under pressure doesn't want too much time in the middle? That's an assessment one has to make. There are quite a few batsmen. We from the outside talk about Pollard has to bat at 4 and Dinesh Karthik has to bat at 3 or 4. But are those guys temperamentally suited to go and take some time and have a kind of a gradual acceleration like a Virat Kohli does or some of the other, seasoned T20 batsmen does? So until Maxwell has got himself ridden of the IPL anxiety, I just wonder whether he can also just come down the order. Karun Nair showed some spark in the last game. I thought he looked good and take the pressure off. So he has one innings where he goes in, gets a 40 or 15, and then maybe is ready to go up the order.
It's a question that's cost a lot of money in the IPL over the years. Bish, how do you get the best out of Glenn Maxwell?
Yeah, can I take my glasses off? I'm seeing my reflection in the computer, and I just want to wipe the tears. I want to wipe the tears away from my eye, because any batsman who doesn't want to get in high up the order, take a chance to get himself in, and then set and fire, I think it's unfortunate, because I believe Maxwell, he brings bowling, he brings fielding, he brings 3 elements to this team. And he has shown at times in the longest format that he has the ability to defend. And once you have a defense, you can then extend on your defense into an attacking shot, is the way that I see batsmanship of the great ones that I've played against. So I struggle always to come to terms with guys who do not want to take the opportunity to bat more deliveries.
Yes, Sanjay, please.
Yeah, you saw me. That's why I did this. Ronak,
I'm assuming you always have a point now.
Yeah, because when we're talking about minds, I always feel there's something that I can add, because that is something that I've always been very fascinated with. I didn't captain India, but I captained at all other levels, and I was perhaps able to read people a little better than some of the others. And if you see someone like Maxwell, with the kind of gifts that he has and the opportunities that he's got, why is he failing so much in the IPL? It just cannot be anything else other than somebody who's a bit anxious. And there are a lot of people. Why do you see drop catches in the IPL so much? In the Ranji Trophy, when nobody's watching, no stakes in those kind of matches, they'll take those catches easily. Anxiety afflicts a lot of people. And when you wonder why a certain player with the talent that he possesses is not quite getting the results, look at the mind. Perhaps that is one of the main reasons.
Is it perhaps also about the success of the franchises? Maxwell plays for a fairly strong, formidable Australian unit, lots of good players in and around him. You look at the history of Kings 11 Punjab. I'm just at the back of my head, top of my head, trying to think about the openers. Bish, you've had Manan Vora, you've had Sehwag towards the end of his career. Chris Gale briefly. I don't think Maxwell was part of that season. I could be wrong. There's been a lot of chopping and changing there. In Rahul, Mayank Agarwal, is there now the promise of some stability, some form that you come at the back of? Would that help a Glenn Maxwell?
I hope so, because structure is able to manage a lot better. From all that you guys and what I've heard about Anil Kumble and what I know of Anil, he brings that, and the Flower brings a level of integrity as well. So Ricky Ponting, when I've heard him talk about the maverick that is Glenn Maxwell and getting into his head, it gives me some hope that this guy can settle in and be a more consistent match winner. However, there are those that say, and I can agree with that as well, that if he wins you 3 games a season, hey, we'll take that.
Yeah, I guess we've always had this conversation, Sanjay, about Punjab, Maxwell Miller, and both of them have never quite taken the IPL by storm. So maybe there was the pressure there. Can you imagine Maxwell playing for another franchise, say Mumbai Indians, batting alongside Pollard and Pandya and finding it easier? Has that got anything to do with the Maxwell story, that Punjab as a franchise perhaps haven't been as successful, and that's affected, that's weighed down on Glenn Maxwell's shoulders?
Wasn't he with Delhi Capitals?
He was initially with Delhi Daredevils. He also played a season for Mumbai.
Yeah, because
at his prime, what you would call his prime.
But that was a settled batting unit, although as a franchise it didn't do too well. So I wonder whether that is the reason. I'm just imagining Maxwell playing for Mumbai Indians, coming after Surya Kumar Yadav or Hardik Pandya. Let's also not forget, when we talk about Miller not firing or Maxwell not firing, let's also not forget that these guys are playing in conditions that are different from what they're used to. Miller plays in South Africa, Maxwell plays in Australia. So these are foreign players trying to reach their potential and their best in conditions that they haven't grown up in. So quite a few foreign players have managed to do it, which is brilliant. But just imagine some of the Indian hitters, if they were called upon to play in a New Zealand T20 league or South Africa or Australia, it would be one of the factors that they would have to deal with. So let's also bring that into it slightly. But more importantly, I think it's the mind. And with Maxwell, we've seen the highs of the kind that we haven't seen with Miller. And that is why Maxwell, gets those kind of chances that he does.
Right. Brilliant. Gentlemen, this has been a fascinating conversation. Let's hope Maxwell smashes it today and gives us something more to talk about. And if he doesn't, then we keep talking about this. So let's see how things go. Half time, first job for Punjab to put some runs on the board. Big thank you to Ian Bishop and Sanjay Manjrekar. Let's hope will come our way on our innings break show on Whirlpool Presents ESPN Cricinfo T20 Timeout, powered by Dell. Until then, let's see what Sharjah has to offer for the second game this season.
Thank you.